My husband expected me to fall apart when he told me I was excluded from the family wedding I had spent over $9,000 funding. He thought the silence in the car was grief, but it was calculation. Instead of tears, I slid a thin envelope across the dashboard. He believed he was leaving for a secret honeymoon with his mistress, never realizing he was actually checking into a nightmare I had designed specifically for him. My name is Valerie Clayton, and looking back, I should have seen the end coming long before the snow started sticking to the windshield of our SUV. We were parked on a quiet side street in Queen Anne, the engine idling just enough to keep the heater humming, creating a false sense of warmth that did not reach the space between us. We had just finished what Grant called a makeup dinner, an overpriced meal of pasta and red wine that was supposed to smooth over the rough edges of the last few months. Instead, the air in the car felt heavy, like the drop in pressure before a tornado touches down. Grant stared straight ahead at the wipers slicing through the slush. He cleared his throat. It was a sound I knew well. It was his lawyer throat, the one he used before delivering bad news to a client who was about to lose everything. "Valerie," he said, keeping his eyes fixed on the dark street. "We need to talk about the logistics for Maui." I turned to look at him. Finally, I thought, finally, we were going to talk about our flight times, or maybe discuss which snorkeling tour we should book for his parents. I had been waiting for weeks to finalize the itinerary. "The thing is," he continued, his voice dropping an octave, "Lauren and Marco have decided they want the wedding to be very intimate, extremely small. They are calling it an immediate family-only event." I blinked. The words landed, but they did not make sense. Immediate family only. "So," I said, my voice sounding calm, almost detached. "Just immediate family." "Exactly," Grant said, finally glancing at me, though his eyes skittered away just as fast. "It is going to be super small. Just parents and siblings, very low-key. Which means, and I hope you understand this, Val, that you will not be coming." The silence that followed was loud enough to ring in my ears. I looked at my husband of 12 years. I looked at the man whose law school tuition I had paid off. I looked at the man wearing the cashmere coat I bought him for Christmas. "Just immediate family," I repeated, testing the weight of the phrase. "And what exactly is your wife?" "Grant, a roommate. A casual acquaintance." Grant let out a sigh, a long, dramatic exhale that fogged up the window. He brought his hand up and pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture that used to make me want to comfort him, but now made my stomach turn. "Val, please do not make a scene," he said, his tone shifting from apologetic to patronizing in a heartbeat. "It is not about us. It is about the bride and groom. The venue has a strict capacity limit. Marco comes from a very traditional family, and they have taken up most of the guest list. There is literally no space. No space." I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound that seemed to startle him. "Let me get this straight," I said, ticking the names off on my fingers, my leather gloves creaking with each movement. "I paid for your mother, Judith. I paid for your father, Warren. I paid for Aunt Dolores, who isn't even blood related, but we love her anyway. I paid for your cousin Kyle and his brand new girlfriend of 3 months. I paid for Lauren. I paid for Marco." I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper that was more dangerous than a scream. "I paid for the flights. I paid for the villa package at the Hale Cupono Resort. I transferred $9,450 from our joint account, my income, Grant, to cover this dream family vacation, and now you are telling me there is space for Kyle's flavor of the month. But not for your wife." Grant winced. He hated talking about money. He hated it because for the last decade, I was the one making it while he played the part of the up-and-coming attorney who just needed a little more time to make partner. "You are twisting things," he snapped. "It is not about the money. God, why does it always have to be about the money with you? This is about respecting Lauren's wishes on her big day. Besides, you have been so stressed lately with the studio. You are burned out." He reached out, attempting to cover my hand with his. I pulled away before he could make contact. "Look," he said, softening his voice into that smooth, persuasive cadence he used in court. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise. You stay here in Seattle. Rest. Relax. I will book you a full week at that spa you like downtown. The expensive one. My treat. You can just decompress while we deal with the family chaos. I will pay for everything. I stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time in months. My treat. He was offering to send me away with money that came from the direct deposit of my own design firm. He was trying to bribe me with my own earnings to stay away from a vacation I had funded. Suddenly, the last 6 months clicked into place. The late nights at the office, the phone turned face down on the coffee table, the sudden password change on his laptop that he claimed was a firm-wide security policy, the way he had stopped touching me, the way he looked through me at breakfast, as if I were a ghost haunting his kitchen rather than the woman who owned it. He did not just want me to miss a wedding. He wanted me erased. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the snow outside. I was not part of the family. I was the financier. I was the ATM machine that smiled at parties and kept the lights on while they played out their fantasies. And now, for whatever reason, my presence was an inconvenience to the narrative he was building. Grant was watching me closely, his brow furrowed in mock concern. He expected me to cry. That was the script we had followed for years. He would hurt me. I would cry. He would comfort me. And I would forgive him because I was Valerie, the supportive wife, the rock. He was waiting for the tears. Instead, I reached for the door handle. "Where are you going?" he asked, panic flickering in his eyes for the first time. "Val, it is freezing out there. Get back in the car. We are not done discussing this. We are done," I said. I pushed the door open. The biting wind hit my face, shocking my system, waking me up from a 12-year coma. I stepped out onto the slushy pavement, my boots crunching on the ice. "Valerie," Grant shouted, leaning across the seat. "Don't be dramatic. How are you going to get home?" I slammed the door shut, cutting off his voice. The thud echoed in the empty street. I pulled my phone from my coat pocket. My fingers were shaking, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline flooding my veins. I opened my messages and found Lena Morales. "Pick me up at 3rd and Pike," I typed. "I am done." As I walked away from the car, I did not look back. I knew Grant was watching me, probably shaking his head, telling himself I was just being emotional, that I would cool down and call him in an hour to apologize for storming off. He had no idea. As the snow fell harder, dusting the shoulders of my coat, a single, terrifying question formed in my mind, crystal clear and sharp as a blade. If he has the audacity to do this to my face, what exactly has he been doing behind my back? I turned the corner, leaving my husband and his immediate family plans in the rearview mirror. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just kept walking, and with every step, the Valerie who paid the bills and kept her mouth shut began to die. The woman who took her place was something else entirely, and she was ready to collect what she was owed. It was not just the cold biting at my exposed cheeks that made me shiver as I walked away from the car. It was the sudden, violent clarity of the last 12 years replaying in my mind. The snow was falling harder now, blurring the streetlights, but my memory was sharpening, peeling back layers of excuses I had painted over our marriage. I rewound the tape to when I was 26 years old. I was working out of a corner of our cramped living room, the blue light of my dual monitors illuminating the stacks of Grant's law textbooks. I had just landed my first major contract for a tech startup in South Lake Union, designing their entire user interface. When the check cleared, I did not buy the designer handbag I had been eyeing or put a down payment on a new car. I wrote a check to the university bursar to cover Grant's final semester of law school because his student loans were maxing out and his parents claimed they were liquidating assets that never seemed to liquidate. Grant had hugged me then, burying his face in my neck, promising that we were a team. He called it an investment in our future. I believed him. I believed that my sweat equity would eventually yield dividends of partnership and mutual respect. That pattern became the foundation of our entire life, poured in concrete before the ink on our marriage license was dry. When we bought the condo in the suburbs, The mortgage officer looked exclusively at my credit score and my tax returns from Signal North Studio. Grant was still bouncing between junior associate positions, trying to find a firm that fit his specific need for prestige without the accompanying grueling hours. I signed the papers. I set up the autopay. I was the one who worried about interest rates while Grant worried about which tie made him look more like a partner. My studio grew from a freelance gig into a legitimate business with a small team and a steady stream of high-profile clients. I worked 16-hour days, managing client expectations and deadlines, ensuring that the cash flow was consistent enough to support us both during Grant's lean months. And yet, whenever we went to Sunday dinner at his parents' house, the narrative shifted. I could see Judith sitting at the head of the table, swirling her Chardonnay, looking at me with that tight, pitying smile. She would ask Grant about his cases, her eyes lighting up as he described legal maneuvers he had barely participated in. Then she would turn to me and ask if I was still doing my little art projects. She called my career cute. She called it a nice hobby for a woman who did not have children yet. But I noticed she never complained when I picked up the check. Not once in a decade did Judith or Warren reach for their wallets when the bill came at the Italian steakhouse they loved. They let the girl with the cute hobby lay down the platinum card, and they ordered dessert. The realization hit me harder than the freezing wind. I had been buying my way into this family for years, paying a subscription fee for a membership they never intended to honor. The invitation for the Maui wedding had arrived 3 months ago on a Tuesday. Grant had plucked it from the mailbox, waving the heavy cream cardstock in the air like a winning lottery ticket. He talked about how beautiful the Hale Kupono resort was, how this was going to be the family reunion of the century, and how much we all needed this break. Then came the pivot. I knew it was coming before he even finished his sentence. He sat down on the sofa, loosened his tie, and gave me that look, the one that combined flattery with laziness. "You are so much better at these details than I am." "Val," he had said, sliding the RSVP card toward me. "Why don't you handle the logistics? Check the flights. Look into the room blocks. I am swamped with the Henderson case, and I trust your taste, my taste." That was code for my ability to organize chaos and my willingness to pay for the upgrade. So I did what I always did. I became the unpaid administrative assistant. I spent evenings scouring travel sites, comparing flight durations, and reading fine print. I called the resort 3 times to negotiate a group rate for the villas, because Judith insisted she needed an ocean view but refused to pay ocean view prices. I created a color-coded spreadsheet tracking arrival times, dietary restrictions for Aunt Dolores, and activity preferences for Kyle and his new girlfriend. I remembered sitting at the kitchen island 2 weeks ago. The glow of my laptop screen, the only light in the room. It was past midnight. Grant was asleep in the bedroom, having texted me earlier that he was too exhausted to discuss the budget. I was staring at the final summary page on the resort's booking portal. The total was staggering. By the time I clicked confirm, I had already fronted most of the costs for his family's Maui plans. $9, $450 later. I was funding a celebration I was being quietly written out of. I clicked the mouse, confirmed. The money left our joint account the next morning. It was technically our money, but 90% of the funds in that account came from Signal North invoices. Grant's salary from Ashford and Brantley was decent now, but he treated it like his personal allowance, spending it on suits, watches, and client dinners that never seemed to result in new clients. Standing there on the sidewalk, watching the taillights of a passing bus blur in the snow, I felt a surge of nausea. I had paid for the stage, the lighting, and the costumes for a play I was not even allowed to audition for. Grant had watched me plan this trip. He had watched me stress over the connection times for his mother. He had watched me move money around to ensure the credit card balance stayed healthy. He had watched me do all of this knowing, the entire time, that he was going to cut me out. He had let me pay the bill before he told me I was not welcome at the table. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. It was not just a betrayal of love. It was a financial heist. He had waited until the transaction was irreversible, until the non-refundable deposits were locked in, to deliver his speech about immediate family. I realized then that to Grant, I was not a wife. I was a resource. I was a line of credit with a pulse. I was the person who hit confirm on the decisions he wanted to make but could not afford. The wind picked up, cutting through my coat, but I welcomed the sting. It woke me up. For 12 years, I had been pressing that confirm button, agreeing to his terms, funding his lifestyle, and subsidizing his ego. I had thought I was building a life, but I was just paying rent in his. Well, the lease was up, and I was about to evict the tenant. The memory that haunted me most wasn't the cold silence in the car. It was the warmth of the dining room 3 weeks earlier. It was a Tuesday night, but the house in Bellevue was lit up like Christmas had arrived early. My in-laws, Judith and Warren, had insisted on hosting a pre-trip dinner to celebrate the finalization of the Maui plans. The air inside smelled of roasted garlic and expensive red wine. A football game was blaring from the 60-inch screen in the living room, the Seattle Seahawks fighting for yardage. But nobody was really watching. The focus was entirely on the islands. I stood near the kitchen island, a glass of Pinot Noir in my hand, feeling a rare sense of belonging. Usually, these dinners felt like performance art where I was the understudy who didn't quite know the lines. But tonight was different. Tonight, I was the producer. I had funded the show, and the gratitude in the room felt tangible. Lauren, the bride-to-be, came rushing over to me, her face flushed with excitement and Chardonnay. She threw her arms around my neck, squeezing tight enough to spill a little of my wine. "I still cannot believe you did this, Val," she said, pulling back to look at me with wide, shining eyes. "Seriously, the villa looks insane. Marco and I were looking at the photos online last night, and we were literally screaming. Having you there with us for the whole week is going to make it perfect. You are the only one who keeps Grant sane, you know." I smiled, feeling a genuine warmth spread through my chest. "It is my pleasure," I said, and I meant it. We all need the break. Grant was across the room, leaning against the mantel with his father, laughing at something on the television. He looked handsome, relaxed, the furrow between his brows smoothed out for the first time in months. I told myself this was worth every penny. The atmosphere shifted when I walked into the kitchen to help clear the appetizer plates. Judith and Aunt Dolores were standing by the oven, arguing over a printed schematic of the resort layout. "I do not see how this works," Dolores was saying, tapping a manicured fingernail on the paper. "If the villa has 4 master suites and 2 guest bungalows, the bed count is tight." Judith shook her head, adjusting her glasses. "It is fine. Dolores, we just have to be smart about the room assignments. The resort only confirmed space for 8 guests in the main block. We might have to double up somewhere or pull in a cot." I paused, a stack of dirty plates in my hands. The noise from the living room seemed to drop away. 8 guests, I asked, stepping forward. Judith jumped slightly, turning to face me. Her smile was tight, the kind of expression one wears when a service worker drops a tray. "Oh, Valerie, we were just trying to figure out the sleeping arrangements. It is a bit of a puzzle, but there are 9 of us," I said, setting the plates down on the granite counter. I did the math in my head instantly. Mom and Dad, you, Dolores, Kyle and his girlfriend, Lauren and Marco, Grant and me. That is 9 people. I looked at Judith, expecting her to nod and say they would add a rollaway bed. Instead, she looked past me, her eyes darting toward the hallway where Grant was standing. "Well," Judith said, her voice pitching up slightly, 9 adults is a lot for one villa complex. The booking confirmation only listed 8 spots for the breakfast package, too. I assumed it was just a glitch in their system. Lauren walked in then, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. "What glitch?" she asked. "The head count," I said, my voice steady but my heart starting to thump a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. "Your mom says the resort only has 8 guests listed, but we are a party of 9. Lauren frowned, doing the same mental calculation I had just done. "That is weird," she said. "Okay, so Mom and Dad, Aunt Dee, Kyle and Tiffany, me and Marco, Grant and Valerie. Yeah, that is 9. Did they forget Tiffany? I told Kyle to make sure her name was on the list. When Lauren said my name paired with Grant, I watched Judith's face. It was a micro-expression, a flicker of discomfort that lasted less than a second. But I caught it. Her eyes did not meet mine. She looked down at the casserole dish she was holding. I am sure it is just a clerical error, Judith said loudly. Too loudly. Anyway, we can sort it out when we get there. Grant. She shouted for her son, effectively ending the conversation. Grant appeared in the doorway, holding his drink. Grant. Honey, Judith said, beaming at him with an intensity that felt frantic. Tell us more about that partner track review you mentioned. Warren says the senior partners are looking at your billable hours next week. The subject changed so fast it gave me whiplash. Grant launched into a story about a complex merger he was handling, and the room was swept back into the easy laudatory rhythm of praising the golden boy. I stood by the sink, the water running over a dirty dish, feeling cold. On the drive home that night, the rain was hammering against the roof of our car. I waited until we were on the highway, the rhythmic thumping of the wipers filling the silence. Grant, I said softly, what was that about the room count? Grant sighed, shifting in the driver's seat. He did not look at me. I don't know. Val. Mom gets confused with the online forms. She probably just misread the email. Why do you fixate on these little things? It is not a little thing, I said. If the reservation is wrong, we need to fix it. I paid for 9 people. If they only have 8 listed, someone is sleeping in the lobby. He reached over and patted my knee, his hand heavy and patronizing. Stop stressing. I will handle it. You have done enough. Just let me deal with the resort. Okay, I am tired. Val. It has been a long week. Don't make this a thing. The universal silencer. I stayed quiet for the rest of the drive, but the unease in my gut was growing, twisting like a vine. Later that night, I was in bed, reading a book I wasn't actually absorbing, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was an automated forward from the Hale Cupono Resort. Grant must have synced his email with the reservation system earlier that day, triggering a copy to be sent to the contact email on file mine. I sat up, the blue light of the screen illuminating the dark bedroom. Grant was asleep beside me, his breathing deep and even. I opened the email. Reservation confirmation, Hale Cupono, luxury villa. Dates, February 12th to February 19th. Total guests, 8. Confirmed. My finger hovered over the screen. I scrolled down to the guest manifest. Judith Clayton, Warren Clayton, Dolores Miller, Kyle Clayton, Tiffany R., Lauren Clayton, Marco D., Grant Clayton. I read the list again. I read it a third time. I checked the bottom of the email for a second page. An addendum, a footnote. There was nothing. My name was not there. I looked at the total amount paid at the bottom of the email, $9,450. My money. I looked at my husband's sleeping face. He looked peaceful. He looked like a man who had successfully managed a crisis. My heart felt like it had dropped into my stomach, a physical weight that made it hard to breathe. I turned off the phone and lay back down in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I wanted to wake him up. I wanted to scream, but something stopped me. A survival instinct I didn't know I possessed kicked in, whispering that if I screamed now, he would just have another excuse. He would say it was a mistake. He would say he would fix it. But deep down, in the place where intuition lives, I knew it wasn't a mistake. You don't accidentally leave off the person who paid for the ticket. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. That was the night the suspicion took root, not as a frantic thought, but as a cold, hard fact waiting to be proven. Lena picked me up 10 minutes later. She did not ask questions when I climbed into her Honda Civic, shaking from a combination of hypothermia and rage. She just turned up the heat and drove. The silence in the car was different from the silence with Grant. With Grant, silence was a weapon. With Lena, it was a shield. We were crossing the bridge into Capitol Hill before I finally spoke. I told her the short version, the immediate family rule, the exclusion, the fact that I had paid for the very villa I was banned from entering. Lena kept her eyes on the road, her hands tight on the wheel. She did not gasp. She did not offer platitudes about miscommunication. She waited until we were parked in front of her building, the engine ticking as it cooled, before she looked at me. "That is not forgetting." "Val," she said, her voice hard and flat, "that is a choice. You do not forget the person who signs the checks unless you have already decided they do not matter." Her words stripped away the last layer of my denial. Inside her apartment, the air was warm and smelled of cinnamon tea and old books. Lena set me up on the sofa with a blanket and a mug of something hot, then retreated to her bedroom to give me space. She knew I did not need a hug. I needed answers. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room, the only light source other than the street lamps outside. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. For 12 years, I had respected Grant's privacy. I had never snooped. I had never checked his pockets. I had trusted him because I thought we were building the same building, brick by brick. But tonight, the building had collapsed. I was just sifting through the rubble. I navigated to our bank's website and logged in. The interface was familiar, clean, and sterile. I clicked on the joint checking account first. I had looked at this page 1,000 times, but I had always looked at the top line, the balance, to make sure we had enough for the mortgage or the bills. I had never truly looked at the texture of the spending. I downloaded the transaction history for the last 6 months and exported it into a spreadsheet. I am a designer. I look for patterns. I look for user flows. And as I sorted the data by merchant, a pattern emerged that made my breath catch in my throat. There was a recurring transfer to a credit card I did not recognize. It was a secondary card attached to the account. One Grant had told me he used for gas and small incidentals to build points. I clicked on the card details. The screen refreshed, and the list of transactions populated. It was not gas. $350 at the Golden Oar, a seafood place in West Seattle, $412 at the Nest, a rooftop bar downtown, $200 for flowers from a boutique florist in Belltown. I felt a cold sweat prickle the back of my neck. These charges were all on Friday and Saturday nights. I opened a second tab and pulled up our shared Google Calendar. I kept it synced so I would know when not to schedule dinner parties. I scrolled back to the dates on the bank statement. October 14th, a Friday. The charge was for a dinner for two at Canlis, $600. On the calendar, Grant had blocked out that entire evening with a gray box labeled Internal Review. Preparation for Henderson case. November 11th, a Saturday. A charge for a couples massage at a luxury day spa in Bellevue, $300. On the calendar, firm retreat. Team building. I stared at the screen, my eyes burning. He wasn't just lying. He was billing his affair to our marriage. Every time he had texted me saying he was exhausted, that he was grinding for our future, that he was eating takeout at his desk. He had been eating oysters and drinking vintage Cabernet with someone else. Then I saw the biggest anomaly. 3 charges, spaced 1 month apart, for a place called Crescent Tide Villas. It was a boutique hotel chain in California. I had never been there. Grant had never gone to California for work. I Googled the location. It was a romantic getaway spot on the coast, famous for its privacy and ocean views. The dates matched the weekends Grant claimed he was visiting his old college roommate in Portland. He had lied about the location. He had lied about the company. And he had used our money I had likely transferred into that account from my studio earnings to pay for the bed he slept in with her. The word formed in my mind for the first time. Heavy and ugly. Affair. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a midlife crisis. It was a systematic, funded, and scheduled operation. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me, violent and sharp. I pressed my hand over my mouth, squeezing my eyes shut. I wanted to throw the laptop across the room. I wanted to scream until my throat bled. But then I heard Lena in the other room, moving quietly, and I forced myself to breathe. If I screamed now, I lost. If I broke things now, I was just the crazy wife. I needed to be the architect. I opened my eyes. The tears that had gathered on my lashes were cold. I wiped them away with the back of my hand. I was done crying. I needed more. I needed to see the communication. The money told me where and when, but I needed to know who and how long. I opened a new incognito tab. Years ago, when we were first married and drunk on the idea of total transparency, Grant and I had shared our passwords. He had said, "What is mine is yours. Val, no secrets." We had written them down in a little notebook I kept in the fire safe, but I had memorized his main email password because it was the date of our first kiss, followed by his favorite baseball player's jersey number. He had probably changed it. Smart cheaters changed their passwords, but Grant was arrogant. He was the kind of man who thought he was smarter than everyone else in the room, especially his wife. He thought I was too trusting to look. So why bother changing the locks? I typed in his email address. I typed in the password. August 12/24. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic bird trapped in a cage. I hit enter. The loading bar crawled across the top of the screen. I held my breath. The screen blinked white, then refreshed. Welcome, Grant. The inbox flooded the screen. I did not feel triumphant. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a crime scene. I was looking at the autopsy of my marriage before the body was even cold. I sat there in the dark of Lena's living room, the blue light illuminating my face, and I began to read. I typed the word Maui into the search bar of Grant's inbox. I expected to find recent confirmations, perhaps a few exchanges with the resort concierge about champagne upon arrival. What I found was a thread dating back 4 months, long before he had sat me down in the car to deliver his speech about immediate family. I opened an email from Judith dated in early October. The subject line was simply, "Wedding Logistics." I read Judith's words. She was asking about the guest list limits. She wrote that while she understood the desire for intimacy, it felt strange to exclude me after I had already sent the deposit for the flights. She asked, point blank, what he intended to tell me. My heart hammered a slow, painful rhythm against my ribs. Judith knew. She had known for months. She had eaten my food, drunk my wine, and let me pay the bill at the bistro last week, all while knowing I was being erased from the itinerary. But it was Grant's reply that made the air leave the room. I scanned his response. He told his mother not to worry. He wrote that I would understand. Then came the sentence that made me stop breathing for a moment. He wrote that I had been incredibly clingy lately, that I was suffocating him with my need for validation, and that a week apart would be healthy for both of us. Clingy. I stared at the word. I was the woman who ran a profitable design studio. I was the woman who handled the mortgage, the taxes, and the investments. I was the woman who had spent the last 3 months working late to pay for his family's vacation. And he called me clingy because I expected to be included in the life I was financing. I scrolled down. There was another thread, this one with Lauren. Grant had lied to me in the car. He had said the exclusion was Lauren's idea, driven by the groom's traditional family, but here, in black and white pixels, was the truth. Lauren had replied to him with irritation. She asked why he was blaming the venue capacity when the villa clearly slept 10 people. She told him that she did not want to be the bad guy, and if he did not want me there, he needed to be the one to tell me, not hide behind her wedding rules. He had made his sister the villain to protect his own cowardice. I navigated away from the family betrayal and typed a new name into the search bar, Crescent Tide Villas. The search results populated instantly. There were 3 separate confirmation emails for 3 separate weekends. The dates aligned perfectly with the bank transactions I had found earlier. I opened the most recent confirmation. Guest name Grant Clayton. Additional guest Erica Walsh. I knew the name. Erica Walsh was a second-year associate at Ashford and Brantley. I had met her at the firm's holiday party last December. She was young, perhaps 24, with shiny hair and a way of looking at Grant that I had dismissed as professional admiration. I remembered her complimenting my dress that night, telling me how lucky I was to be married to a mentor like Grant. I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. She had been in my house. She had eaten the hors d'oeuvres I prepared. She had smiled at me while she was sleeping with my husband. I needed more. I needed to know the narrative they were telling each other. I opened a new tab and logged into his iCloud account. The synchronization took a moment, the little wheels spinning while I sat in the dark, my hands trembling slightly. When the messages loaded, I clicked on the thread with Erica. It was not just a fling, it was a full-blown alternate reality. I scrolled back to the weeks leading up to the Maui decision. I read their banter. They joked about the wedding. Erica called it their trial honeymoon. She sent him emojis of bikinis and palm trees. Then I saw a message from Grant sent 2 weeks ago. Right around the time I was finalizing the spreadsheet for the trip, Erica had asked if he was worried I would suspect something since I was handling all the bookings. Grant's reply was a masterpiece of cruelty. He told her not to worry. He said I was so obsessed with being the perfect organizer, so busy color-coding the itinerary and paying the invoices, that I wouldn't notice if a bomb went off in the living room. He called me useful. Useful. I forced myself to keep reading. I needed to see the bottom of the well. I found a text from 3 days ago. Erica was pressing him about the future. She wanted to know when he was going to leave me. She asked why he was waiting if he was so miserable. Grant's response was long. It was calculated. It was the writing of a lawyer planning a case. He told her that he could not leave yet. He explained that he was up for the partnership review in 6 months. He said that a messy divorce right now would look unstable to the senior partners. He explicitly stated that he needed to keep things steady until his position was secured and his salary bumped up. Then came the line that severed the last thread of my affection for him. He wrote that I was a necessary financial buffer. He said he didn't want the finances to get messy while he was still leveraging my income to maintain his lifestyle. He called me his risk wall. I sat back against Lena's sofa cushions. The tears I expected did not come. The heartbreak I had felt in the car was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Grant did not just fall out of love. He was using me. He was strip-mining my life to build a foundation for his next one. He planned to discard me the moment I was no longer profitable to his ambition. I looked at the screen. The blue light reflected in my eyes, but I felt nothing but ice. He wanted a buffer. He wanted a wall to protect him from risk. I opened a folder on my desktop. I named it Exit Plan. Methodically, with the steady hands of a surgeon, I began to take screenshots. I captured the emails with Judith. I captured the thread with Lauren proving he lied. I captured the hotel bookings with Erica. I captured the text messages where he mocked me and outlined his plan to use me for 6 more months. I dragged every single file into the folder. I was not going to be his victim. I was not going to be the sad, clingy wife who got left behind. Grant wanted a wall. Fine, I would be the wall. But he had no idea that I was not there to protect him anymore. I was the wall he was speeding toward at 100 miles an hour, and I was going to make sure he felt every single inch of the impact. The next morning, the air in Lena's kitchen smelled of roasted coffee beans and war. I had not slept, but my mind felt strangely sharp, like a lens that had finally been wiped clean of grease. Lena slid a mug of black coffee across the granite island toward me. Beside it, she placed a small, cream-colored business card. Monica Reyes, Family Law, Harbor Line Legal Group. If you are going to fight, Lena said, leaning against the counter with her arms crossed. You need a general, not a therapist. Monica is a shark in a silk blouse. She handled my sister's divorce when her ex tried to hide his crypto assets. She found every cent. I picked up the card. The edges were sharp. I called the number at 9 o'clock. By 10:30, I was sitting in a leather chair in a discreet office in Pioneer Square. It was not the kind of glass and steel skyscraper where Grant worked. It was a brick building with exposed beams and quiet efficiency. Monica Reyes was a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a handshake that suggested she did not waste time. I did not cry. I did not ask for a tissue. Instead, I placed a thick manila folder on her mahogany desk. Inside was everything I had printed from the exit plan folder I had compiled the night before. I want you to look at the cross-referencing on page 3, I said, my voice steady. Monica opened the file. She adjusted her glasses and began to read. For 10 minutes. The only sound in the room was the turning of pages and the soft scratching of her pen on a legal pad. She paused at the bank statements. She lingered on the calendar screenshots. Finally, she looked up at me. This is thorough, she said. It is accurate, I replied. Monica tapped the spreadsheet where I had highlighted the charges for the golden ore and the nest. You have realized, of course, that this is not just adultery, she said. In Washington state, we are a community property jurisdiction. Courts generally do not punish a spouse for cheating by awarding more money to the other party, unless the cheating spouse used marital funds to conduct the affair. She pointed to the column of numbers. This is dissipation of marital assets. He is using your joint money you contributed to finance a relationship with Ms. Walsh. That gives us leverage to reclaim those funds in the settlement. She flipped to the next page, the one comparing the credit card charges to Grant's work calendar. Her eyes narrowed. But this, she said, tapping the entry for the dinner at Canlis labeled Internal Review. This is more interesting. If he submitted these receipts to Ashford and Brantley as client entertainment expenses for reimbursement, he is committing fraud against his firm. I nodded. I had suspected as much. Grant was greedy, and he felt entitled. Why pay for his own affairs when he could make the firm pay for them? That is a disbarable offense, Monica said quietly. Or at the very least, a career-ending one. If they find out he is padding his expense reports to sleep with a subordinate associate, he will not be making partner. He will be lucky if he is not escorted out by security. I sat back in the chair. I thought about the partner track he was so obsessed with. I thought about the prestige he craved more than he craved me. I do not want to destroy him just for the sake of it, I said, surprising myself. I want what is mine. I want the money I put into his education. I want the equity in the house. I want the $9,000 for the Maui trip. I want to walk away clean. Monica nodded, a small, dangerous smile playing on her lips. We can get all of that, but we need to be smart. If we file today, he goes on the defensive. He might try to hide assets or destroy the evidence on his work server. She leaned forward. We need a strategy. We prepare the divorce petition now. We draft a forensic accounting of your contributions versus his. We lock down the evidence of the expense fraud, but we do not serve him yet. Why not, I asked. Because right now, he thinks you are the clingy, oblivious wife, she said. He is arrogant. Arrogant men make mistakes. Let him go to Maui. Let him think he has won. Let him spend more money. Let him dig the hole so deep that when we finally kick the ladder away, he won't even see the daylight. I looked at the rain streaking the window behind her. It was a classic Seattle gray. But for the first time, it didn't feel depressing. It felt like cover. Can I hold him accountable while keeping my hands clean, I asked. Monica closed the folder. You provide the ammunition. Valerie, I pull the trigger. That is how this works. But you have to be able to play the part. Can you go home and pretend everything is fine? Can you look him in the eye and not scream? I thought about the last 12 years. I thought about the way I had smiled through his mother's insults. I thought about the way I had managed his moods, smoothed over his anxieties, and played the role of the supportive partner while he treated me like furniture. I have been acting for a decade. I said, I just didn't know I was in character until now. We spent the next hour mapping out the timeline. I would return home. I would apologize for my outburst in the car. I would play the part of the stressed-out wife who just wanted to save her marriage. I would suggest counseling to make him feel secure, and while he was busy patting himself on the back for managing me, I would be moving my money. Monica advised me to open a separate account at a different bank immediately. She told me to start diverting my freelance income. She told me to document everything. As I stood up to leave, I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't happiness, but it was power. For years, I had been the one worrying about the foundation of our life, checking for cracks, patching the leaks. Grant had relied on that. He had relied on me being the safety net. He had called me a risk wall in his text to Erica. He thought I was there to absorb the impact of his bad decisions. I walked out of the office and onto the wet sidewalk. I pulled my coat tighter around me. I was not going to be his wall anymore. I was going to be the demolition crew. But first, I had to go home and bake him a cake. I had to let him believe he was safe right up until the moment the roof caved in. I hailed a cab, not to go back to Lena's, but to go to the bank. I had a new account to open, and then I had a husband to deceive. The game had changed. He was playing checkers with a mistress, but I was playing chess with his life. And I had the advantage of the first move. The key to a good lie is not the words you use, but the space you leave for the other person to fill with their own ego. When I walked back into our condo the day after the blizzard, Grant was sitting on the living room sofa, his posture stiff, rehearsing the speech he was about to give me about boundaries and respect. I didn't let him start. I dropped my keys on the console table, walked over to him, and let my shoulders slump in a perfect imitation of defeat. "I am sorry," I said, my voice soft and trembling just enough to be convincing. "I reacted badly last night. I was tired, and the news just shocked me. I did not mean to make everything about myself." Grant blinked. The tension drained out of his frame instantly, replaced by a smug sense of validation. He stood up and wrapped his arms around me, kissing the top of my head. "It is okay, babe," he murmured into my hair. "I know you have been stressed with the studio. I just need you to trust me on this Maui thing. It is complicated family politics." "I trust you," I lied, closing my eyes not to savor the hug, but to hide the repulsion I felt at his touch. For the next 3 weeks, I gave the performance of a lifetime. I became the model wife from a 1950s sitcom. I cooked his favorite pot roast on Tuesdays. I ironed his shirts, making sure the collars were crisp for his meetings with Erica. I asked him about his day and listened with wide, attentive eyes as he spun elaborate fictions about caseloads and client demands. Every time he lied, I smiled, and every time I smiled, he relaxed a little more. He thought he had successfully managed me. He thought I was subdued, grateful, and harmless. But while Grant was living in the comfort of his deception, I was building a parallel life. During the days, while he was at the firm, or more accurately, at long lunches with his mistress, I was dismantling our financial entanglement brick by brick. I opened a new high-yield savings account at a credit union across town, one that had no affiliation with our main bank. I started moving the money. I couldn't drain the joint account all at once. That would trigger alerts and panic. Instead, I invoiced our joint account from my business. I labeled the transfers as capital reinvestment or software licensing fees. $2,000 on a Monday, $1,500 on a Thursday, $3,000 the following Tuesday. Grant never checked. He was too busy planning his trial honeymoon to look at the line items. He saw the balance fluctuate, but since I was the one who usually replenished it, he assumed it was just the ebb and flow of business. By the time the third week ended, I had successfully extracted nearly 40% of my liquid contributions. I also found a sanctuary. I rented a one-bedroom apartment in Fremont, a quirky neighborhood north of the canal that Grant hated because he thought it was too hipster. It was perfect. The apartment had hardwood floors, a view of the bridge, and most importantly, my name was the only one on the lease. Lena held the spare key. We spent 2 afternoons moving in the essentials: a mattress, a desk, a coffee maker. I bought everything with a new credit card I had opened in my maiden name. Standing in that empty living room, listening to the rain hit the skylight, I felt the first true breath of oxygen I had taken in months. It was small, but it was mine. Back at the house, the charade continued. I upped the ante by suggesting marriage counseling. "I think we have been distant," I told Grant one evening over dinner. "I want to make sure we are strong before you make partner. I found a therapist, Dr. Brooks. Just a few sessions." Grant hesitated, likely calculating the risk, but then agreed. He probably thought it would look good to have a professional certify that I was the problem. The session with Dr. Brooks was a masterclass in manipulation. I sat on the beige sofa, wringing my hands, and poured my heart out. "I feel like I've been so needy lately," I said, stealing a glance at Grant. "I know Grant needs space to focus on his career, but I just get so anxious when he is away. I know I'm suffocating him." I watched Grant's face. He looked almost giddy. I was practically reading from the script he had written in his emails to his mother. Dr. Brooks nodded sympathetically. "It sounds like you are carrying a lot of insecurity." "Valerie," she said. "I am," I admitted, looking down at my lap. "I just want to support him better." Grant reached over and took my hand. performing the role of the benevolent, patient husband. She tries hard. "Doc," he said, "it is just a lot of pressure on me right now. I need her to be more independent." I squeezed his hand back, fighting the urge to vomit. Independent. I thought, be careful what you wish for. Grant. That night, while Grant was in the shower, washing off the scent of whatever perfume Erica wore, his phone lit up on the nightstand. I didn't need to unlock it to see the preview notification. Erica. Missing the view from Crescent Tide tonight. And you? Mostly you. I picked up my own phone and took a photo of the screen. I added it to the digital folder. Date stamped and tagged. The next day, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket for a dinner at a steakhouse in Bellevue. $300. The date was last Friday. He had told me he was working late on a brief. I scanned the receipt and filed it under dissipation of assets. Every lie he told was another dollar back in my pocket during the settlement. The week before the Maui trip, the atmosphere in the house was buzzing with his suppressed excitement. He was packing his bags, humming to himself, checking his flight status. He thought he had pulled off the perfect crime. He was going to a tropical paradise with his girlfriend, and his wife was staying home to work on her anxiety, on his last night in our bed. I waited until his breathing deepened into the heavy rhythm of deep sleep. I slipped out from under the duvet and walked into the kitchen. The moonlight was spilling across the floor, illuminating the stainless steel refrigerator. It was covered in magnets and photos, 12 years of memories. Grant and me in front of the Eiffel Tower. Grant and me at his law school graduation. Grant and me at my sister's wedding. I looked at the smiling woman in those photos. She looked so happy. She looked so safe. I felt a pang of pity for her, but I pushed it down. She was gone. Quietly. Methodically. I began to peel the photos off the fridge. I took down the photo of us skiing in Whistler. I took down the photo booth strip from our 5th anniversary. I took down the snapshot of us closing on this condo. I placed them all in a shoebox I had left on the counter. When I was done, the fridge was a blank. Steel slate. It looked cold. It looked empty. I reached into the box and pulled out one single photo. It was our official wedding portrait. We were standing on the steps of the courthouse, Grant looking dashing in his suit, me looking radiant in white lace. I placed that single photo back in the center of the fridge door, securing it with a heavy magnet. I stared at it. It wasn't a memory anymore. It was an exhibit. "You are going to need that," I whispered to the empty room. "When the lawyers ask you to prove you were ever happy, this is all you will have left." I sealed the shoebox with tape and placed it in the donate pile by the back door. Then I walked back to the bedroom and slid into bed beside the man who was dreaming of a beach without me. I closed my eyes and slept soundly for the first time in weeks. The acting was over. The stage was set. Tomorrow, he would fly away, and I would burn the theater down. The days leading up to the flight were a study in contrast. Grant was vibrating with an energy I hadn't seen in years, a mix of adrenaline and anticipation that he tried poorly to disguise as stress. He walked around the condo humming to himself, checking his weather app for Wailea every 20 minutes, and talking about how good the ocean air would be for his sinuses. He carefully avoided looking me in the eye when he mentioned the itinerary, filling the silence with empty promises about how he would make this up to me. "Next year, we will go to Cabo," he said one evening while trying on his swim trunks in front of the bedroom mirror. "Or maybe Napa. Just the two of us. No family, no drama. I promise. Val." I watched him from the bed, my face arranged into a mask of wistful understanding. "That sounds lovely, Grant," I said, inside. I was screaming. There would be no Cabo. There would be no Napa. By next year, the only thing we would be sharing was a court date. 2 nights before he left, I insisted on taking him to dinner at Skyline Bistro. I told him I wanted to send him off properly, to celebrate the family coming together even if I couldn't be there. We sat by the window. The lights of downtown Seattle spread out below us like scattered diamonds on black velvet. I ordered a bottle of the Cabernet he liked, the one that cost $120, and I watched him drink it. I raised my glass for a toast. "To the family," I said, keeping my voice steady. And to new chapters. May this trip be everything you deserve. Grant clinked his glass against mine, smiling that wide, charming smile that had hooked me 12 years ago. To family, he echoed. He thought I was toasting to his sister's wedding and our reconciled marriage. He had no idea I was toasting to the impending implosion of his career and the freedom I was about to snatch back. He drank the wine, oblivious to the fact that he was celebrating his own funeral. The night before the flight was the hardest performance yet. I helped him pack. This was the ritual we had done dozens of times, a choreography of intimacy that now felt like a violation. I folded his linen shirts, I paired his socks, I packed the toiletry bag, ensuring his cologne was tightly capped. I even went to the pantry and grabbed 2 bags of those sour gummy worms he was addicted to, tucking them into the side pocket of his carry-on. For the plane, I said, zipping the bag shut. Then, I took a yellow sticky note and wrote on it in my neatest handwriting, "Don't forget your SPF 50. I don't want you to burn." I stuck it to the bottle of sunscreen. Grant saw it and laughed, pulling me into a hug. "You take such good care of me, Val," he said, kissing my forehead. "I don't know what I would do without you. You are about to find out," I thought, resting my head against his chest one last time. I listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong, and wondered how fast it would be racing in 48 hours. The morning of the flight was gray and drizzly, typical Seattle weather that made the promise of Hawaii seem even more golden. I drove him to SeaTac Airport in silence, letting him control the radio. He was texting furiously, probably Erica, telling her he was on his way. I pulled the SUV up to the curb at the departure level. The terminal was chaotic, filled with families dragging luggage and businessmen checking watches. Grant grabbed his bags from the trunk. He turned to me, his face softening into that look of practiced concern. "Hey," he said, reaching out to cup my cheek. "Don't look so sad. I will call you as soon as I land. We will FaceTime from the beach. It will be like you are right there with me." I nodded, forcing my eyes to shimmer with unshed tears. I bit my lip, playing the role of the devoted, left-behind wife to perfection. "Have a great flight," I whispered. "I love you. I love you too." "Babe," he said, "hold down the fort." He turned and walked through the sliding glass doors, merging into the crowd. I watched him go. I watched the man I had built my life around, the man I had prioritized above my own dignity, walk away to meet his mistress on my dime. The moment the glass doors slid shut behind him, the tears in my eyes evaporated instantly. My spine straightened. The sad, slumping posture of the grieving wife vanished. I put the car in drive and merged back into traffic. I did not go home to cry. I went home to work. By the time I pulled back into the driveway of our condo, the moving truck was already there. I had scheduled them for 9 o'clock sharp. 3 guys in blue jumpsuits were waiting by the curb. I unlocked the front door and propped it open. Everything with a green sticker goes. I told the foreman, the rest stays. It was a surgical extraction. I had spent the previous day subtly marking the furniture and items that I had paid for, or that I wanted. The leather armchair in the corner mine, the 60-inch television mine, the expensive espresso machine that Grant didn't know how to use mine, the artwork on the walls, the Dyson vacuum, the Dyson hairdryer, the Le Creuset cookware set. All of it came from my earnings, and all of it was leaving, for 4 hours. I directed the traffic of my life flowing out the door. The condo, which had been cluttered and cozy that morning, began to echo. I left him the sofa he had bought before we were married. I left him the dining table his parents had given us, which was scratched and ugly anyway. I left him his clothes and his books, but I took the soul of the place. By 1 in the afternoon, the moving truck was pulling away, headed for a storage unit and my new apartment in Fremont. I stood in the middle of the living room. It looked like a skeleton. There were rectangles of brighter paint on the walls where my art used to hang. The air felt different, thinner, colder. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Monica. "The petition has been filed. The clock is stamped. It is official." I stared at the screen. Grant was probably somewhere over the Pacific Ocean right now, sipping a gin and tonic, thinking he had pulled it off. He didn't know that back on the ground. The legal system had just engaged its gears. Monica sent a second text. Freezing order on the joint accounts has been executed. It might take a few hours to propagate to the vendors, but by the time he lands, his cards should be declining. And then a third text. I have a meeting confirmed with the head of human resources at Ashford and Brantley for tomorrow morning. I am bringing the binder. I took a deep breath. The trap was sprung. I walked into the kitchen. It was empty except for the refrigerator, with that single wedding photo I had left as a testament to what used to be. The counters were bare. I reached into my purse and pulled out my set of house keys. I placed them in the center of the granite island. The metal clinking against the stone was the only sound in the quiet house. Next to the keys, I placed a thick white envelope. I stared at it for a long moment. Inside were the copies of the divorce papers, the forensic accounting of my contributions, and the printouts of his texts with Erica, where he called me a risk wall. I reached out and touched the paper. No, this was too easy. If I left it here, he would find it when he came back. Broken and defeated, he would read it alone. I didn't want him to read it alone. I wanted to see his face. I wanted him to look at me when he realized that the risk wall had just fallen on top of him. I picked the envelope back up and slid it into my tote bag. You will get this. Grant, I whispered to the empty room, but you will get it on my terms. I turned around and walked out of the condo. I didn't lock the door behind me. I didn't care who got in. There was nothing left to steal. The only thing of value that had been in that house was me, and I was finally gone. The rain in Fremont sounded different than it did at the condo. Against the single-pane windows of my new apartment, it sounded like applause. I spent those first few days unpacking boxes, arranging my books on shelves that belonged only to me, and drinking tea in a silence that felt heavy and luxurious. My phone was the only tether to the demolition site I had left behind. I had set it to send all calls from Grant directly to voicemail. I did not want to speak to him. I wanted to listen to him unravel. The first voicemail arrived 12 hours after his flight landed. The background noise was the sound of wind and distant ukulele music. Grant's voice was thick with false cheer and gin. "Hey Val," he said. "Just landed. The place is incredible. You would love the bougainvillea. Everyone is asking about you. I told them you are resting. Miss you. Babe." I saved the message. It was an artifact of a man who still thought he was in control. The tone shifted 48 hours later. The second voicemail came in at 2 a.m. Seattle time. The background was quiet. Likely the interior of the bathroom in the villa he was sharing with Erica. His voice was tight. The vowels clipped. "Val, pick up. I just got a weird email from the human resources director at the firm. They are asking about some receipts from October, specifically the canless dinner. Did you talk to anyone? It is probably just an audit glitch. But call me back. I need you to log into the bank and check something for me." I took a sip of my tea and saved the message. I did not log into the bank. I knew exactly what the bank looked like. It looked like a desert. By the fourth day, the facade had cracked completely. Valerie. "Where are you? Why are your cards declined? I tried to pay for the rental car upgrade and the machine rejected the joint card. I called the bank and they said there is a freezing order. What is going on? Call me back immediately. This isn't funny." I listened to his panic like one might listen to a radio drama. It was compelling, but it felt entirely fictional, removed from my reality. I wasn't the wife scrambling to fix his credit limit anymore. I was the audience. The real picture of what was happening on the ground in Maui came from Lauren. She didn't know I had left him yet. She only knew that her brother was losing his mind. Her texts came in a flurry of angry blue bubbles. "I don't know what is going on with Grant," she wrote. "He has been on his phone the entire trip. He missed the rehearsal dinner speeches because he was yelling at someone from his office in the parking lot. Mom is freaking out. He looks sick." Then came the twist that made me smile for the first time in days. And that girl from his firm, Erica Lauren, texted. She was supposed to be here all week working remotely or whatever. She literally packed her bag and took an Uber to the airport this morning. She said there was a family emergency, but she looked terrified. Grant is sitting at the bar alone drinking scotch at 10 in the morning. I set the phone down. Of course she ran. Erica Walsh was a career climber. She had attached herself to Grant because he was a rising star. The moment she realized he was a falling rock, she cut the rope. She wasn't going to let an ethics investigation at Ashford and Brantley drag her down with him. Grant was alone in paradise, paying for drinks with a personal credit card that was rapidly hitting its limit. When Grant finally returned to Seattle, the silence awaiting him must have been deafening. I imagined him taking an Uber home since I wasn't there to pick him up and walking into the condo. I imagined him seeing the empty walls, the missing television, the bare shelves. I imagined him finding the note from the moving company on the counter, but not me. He tried to call me 20 times in 1 hour. My phone didn't even vibrate. It just silently stacked the notifications. Then came the call from Judith. I answered this one. Valerie. Judith's voice was trembling. She sounded older than she was. Valerie, please, I am at the Starbucks near your old studio. Grant is in a state. He says you moved out. He says you froze the money. I will meet you. Judith, I said, but only for 10 minutes. I walked to the coffee shop. I wore a trench coat I had bought with my own money and boots that were made for walking. Judith was sitting at a corner table, wringing her hands around a paper cup. She looked at me as if I were a stranger. He made a mistake. Valerie, she began, her voice pleading. I know he hurt you with the wedding invitation. I told him it was wrong, but to destroy his career, to empty the house. This is a marriage, not a war. I looked at my mother-in-law. This was the woman who had let me pay for her flights, her dinners, and her son's education, all while making jokes about my cute little job. It is not a war. Judith, I said calmly, a war implies two sides fighting. I am not fighting. I am resigning. But he loves you, she insisted, though the words sounded hollow even to her. He is just under so much pressure. If you just come home, we can work this out. We are family. I stood up. I am not family. Judith, you made that very clear. I was the financier, and the bank is closed. I am not contesting the divorce. I am not trying to ruin him. I am simply refusing to continue paying for the choices he makes. If he wants to be a partner, he can start by being a partner in his own life, not a dependent on mine. I walked out before she could answer. I didn't look back to see if she was crying. I suspected she was crying for the loss of her comfort, not for the loss of me. That afternoon, Monica called. Her voice was crisp and professional. It is done, she said. Ashford and Brantley have formally opened an internal investigation into expense fraud. They have flagged the receipts you provided. Grant has been placed on administrative leave pending the results. She paused, the sound of papers shuffling in the background. His lawyer reached out 5 minutes ago. Valerie, they want a meeting. They are calling it a settlement conference, but really, it is a surrender negotiation. They want to stop the bleeding before it hits the public record. They want to know if you will settle quietly if he agrees to your terms. I looked out the window at the Fremont Bridge, watching the cars cross over the dark water. He thinks he can talk his way out of this, I said. He thinks if he gets me in a room, he can charm me or bully me back into submission. Probably. Monica agreed. He asked for you to be there personally. He thinks you will cry. He thinks you are still the woman who begged to go to Maui. I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Tell him yes. I said, set the meeting. I hung up the phone. I walked over to my desk and opened the drawer. Inside lay the thick white envelope I had almost left on the kitchen island. I was glad I had kept it. Leaving it for him to find would have been passive. Handing it to him, that was an active act of reclamation. I ran my thumb over the seal. Inside lay the autopsy of our marriage, the proof of his fraud, the accounting of my stolen money, and the texts where he called me a risk wall. He wanted a meeting. He wanted to see his wife. Well, he was going to get his wish, but he wasn't going to meet Valerie the wife. He was going to meet Valerie the creditor, and I was coming to collect. The conference room on the 42nd floor of the Rainier Tower was sterile, smelling faintly of lemon polish and aggressive air conditioning. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle was a smear of gray clouds and steel, But inside, the atmosphere was sharp enough to cut glass. Grant sat on the opposite side of the mahogany table. He looked tired. The tan he had acquired in Maui was already fading, replaced by a sallow, sleepless pallor. His suit, usually impeccable, looked slightly large for him, as if he had shrunk in the wash. His lawyer, a man named Mr. Henderson who wore a tie that cost more than my first car, sat beside him, arranging papers with performative efficiency. I sat next to Monica. She was calm, her hands folded on the table, a shark resting in shallow water. Grant cleared his throat. "I would like a moment alone with my wife," he said, his voice raspy. "Just 10 minutes. No lawyers." Mr. Henderson looked like he wanted to object, but he nodded. Monica turned to me, raising an eyebrow. I gave a nearly imperceptible nod. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. 10 minutes, she said. "We will be right outside." The heavy door clicked shut, sealing the sound of the office hum away. It was just Grant and me. The silence stretched, thin and brittle. "Val." Grant started, leaning forward. He clasped his hands together, a gesture meant to convey sincerity, but I noticed his knuckles were white. "This has gone too far." I said nothing. I sat with my back straight against the ergonomics of the chair, watching him. "I know I messed up," he continued, the speed of his words increasing. "The affair was a mistake. It was stupid. It meant nothing. But what you are doing, freezing the accounts, sending that file to HR, that is vindictive. Val. You are destroying my career over a lapse in judgment." He paused, waiting for me to speak. When I didn't, he pushed harder. "You are overreacting. You are hurt. And I get that. But we can fix this. I can fix this. You don't want to throw away 12 years because I slept with someone else. Think about the house. Think about our plans. You are hysterical right now. But once you calm down, you will regret burning everything down." He looked at me with those familiar brown eyes, the ones that used to make my knees weak. Now, they just looked desperate. He was still waiting for me to break. He was waiting for the tremble in my lip. He was waiting for the Valerie who would apologize for making him feel bad about his own betrayal. I reached into my leather tote bag. My movement was slow, deliberate. Grant stopped talking, his eyes tracking my hand. I pulled out the thick white envelope. I placed it gently on the polished wood of the table. With 2 fingers, I slid it across the surface until it rested directly in front of him. "I am not hysterical. Grant," I said, my voice low and even, "and I am not overreacting. This is the reason I do not need you to come back, and this is the thing that ends everything." Grant looked at the envelope, then at me. He reached out and opened the flap. He pulled out the stack of documents. The first thing he saw was the copy of the divorce petition, stamped and filed. That was the standard part. It was what was underneath that mattered. He flipped the page. His eyes widened as he saw the spreadsheet. It was the forensic accounting of our marriage. Every dollar I had contributed to his student loans, every mortgage payment, every vacation, every time I had bailed him out. And next to it, the column of his spending the dinners, the hotels, the gifts for Erica. The math was brutal. It showed, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was the engine and he was the passenger. Then he turned to the next page. The color drained from his face. It was the printout of his text thread with Erica. I had highlighted 2 specific phrases in neon yellow: dead weight, risk wall. His hands started to shake. The paper rattled against the table. He looked up at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. He looked back down to the final item in the stack. It was a handwritten letter from me. I had written it that morning. He read it silently, his eyes darting back and forth across the lines. "I did not ask them to fire you, Grant. I simply provided the receipts for the money you stole from our joint assets, which happened to coincide with your expense reports. The investigation is their choice. The fraud was yours. I am withdrawing my capital from this partnership. I am taking what I built. You can keep what you built, which, as the math shows, is nothing but debt and lies." Grant dropped the papers. They fanned out across the table, a chaotic display of his own ruin. Val, he whispered. His voice was broken. This ruins me. If the firm sees this, if my parents see this, I have nothing. I cannot pay the mortgage alone. I cannot pay the legal fees. He looked at me, and for the first time in 12 years, the mask was gone. There was no arrogance. There was no condescension. There was only the naked, terrifying realization that he was standing on a trapdoor that he had unlatched himself. He realized that without me, he wasn't a partner. He wasn't a success. He was a man with a leased car and a mountain of debt he couldn't service. "You are my wife," he pleaded, tears actually pooling in his eyes now. Real tears, tears of fear. "You are supposed to protect me." I stood up. The chair scraped softly against the carpet. I smoothed the front of my trench coat. "I didn't ruin your life, Grant," I said. I looked him dead in the eye. "I just stopped using my life to shield yours. You called me a risk wall. Well, the wall is gone. The impact is all yours." I turned around. "Valerie," he shouted, half rising from his chair. I kept walking. I reached the heavy door, opened it, and stepped into the hallway. Monica was waiting. She looked at my face, then at the door, and gave me a single, sharp nod of approval before she walked into the room to finalize the slaughter. I walked down the long corridor to the elevator. I pressed the button. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and watched the numbers count down. 40, 30, 20, 10, ground floor. I stepped out of the building and into the Seattle evening. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement slick and reflecting the city lights like a mirror. The air smelled of wet concrete and ocean salt. My phone vibrated. I pulled it out. It was an email notification. From TechFront Solutions. Subject contract proposal. Long-term partnership. Body. Dear Valerie, we have reviewed your portfolio from Signal North, and we are blown away. We would like to discuss a 2-year retainer for our entire product suite design. I read the email twice. The numbers they were offering were higher than anything I had made before. It was a new beginning, a beginning that belonged 100% to me. I looked at the empty white envelope I had held on to, the spare one I had kept in my pocket just in case. I didn't need it. I didn't need anything from the past. There was a metal trash can on the corner. I walked over to it and dropped the empty envelope inside. It landed with a soft rustle on top of a discarded coffee cup. I looked up at the sky. It was dark, but the city was bright. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cold, clean air. I adjusted my bag on my shoulder and started walking. I didn't know exactly where I was going for dinner, but for the first time in 12 years, I knew exactly who was paying for it. And I knew exactly what she was worth. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Valerie's revenge. And do not forget to subscribe to the Zoe Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can reach even more people.